I'm Shaniqua, and welcome to my channel, What Shaniqua's Into. On this platform, I make content around the things I'm into, primarily being spirituality through the use of tarot and personal development. So if you are new to this platform, hi, and thank you for being here. I hope you'll subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new uploads. If you are a returning viewer, I have a lot to catch you up on, and I'm under no delusions. I feel like some of you may choose to unsubscribe, and that's totally fine because I am completely switching the type of content that I make. So to give you a little bit of background, I used to make content around natural hair care, and that is something I was very passionate about for a very long time. Over time, I found myself sort of losing the enthusiasm for teaching Black women how to care for their hair in its natural state, and I felt like there were a lot of content creators here on YouTube that were doing a phenomenal job of servicing that community, and so I just kind of went to explore other passions. And now the thing that I am most passionate about is spirituality and personal development, and I am now making content around that. So if you're interested to see what kind of things we're going to talk about on this channel, I really hope that you choose to subscribe and stick around. But I thought that it would make sense to kind of give a bit of background, because spirituality is such a big part of what this channel is going to be about. I felt like it would make sense both for old subscribers who might want to stick around on this new leg of my journey on YouTube, and for new people who are just finding my platform to understand how I came to where I am. Spirituality is such a big part of life, no matter if you are spiritual or not. We just, as human beings, spirituality is a big part of our global society, and I think it makes sense to have some context about where someone is coming from when they're speaking on spiritual matters. So if you saw the thumbnail and the title, then you're gonna know we're gonna talk about how I went from being a Christian to an atheist to a tarot reader. So let's jump in. So I, like most people in America, was raised Christian. I was non-denominational, but even from early childhood, I always had questions around the doctrine and the dogma, because there were just so many inconsistencies and things that didn't make sense to me. And you know, especially with regard to the alls or the omnis, like omniscient, all-powerful, all good, things like that. Those characteristics never sat right in my mind because they were self-contradictory, and whenever I would talk to family members or church officials about these questions, I never received any sort of satisfactory answer. And so from there, in my early teens, I decided that I needed to change my religion, and I briefly explored Buddhism and Wicca, but I felt very alone, and I felt like I needed some instruction from someone who was actually practicing the things that I was researching in order to fully understand them, and I just didn't have that available to me at the time. So I readopted the Christian label in my late teens, but I didn't want to go to church, and I didn't want to read directly from the Bible because of all the contradictions and things like that I saw in it. And plus, I didn't like the way many people in the church would talk about members of the LGBTQ community. I don't think I've ever talked about it on this platform, but I do consider myself bisexual. I'm primarily attracted to men, but I have always been attracted to women as well. So I think most people perceive me as straight because I've only dated men, but I've never been, what's the word, unsure whether or not I was attracted to women. I always have been. So the idea that circumstances of attraction could determine whether or not a person deserved eternal damnation and torture just did not sit well with me. And so that was why, even when I readopted the Christian label, I was not into being in the church. It just felt like a very hateful, divisive place. And I know that all churches do not espouse the same rhetoric around members of the LGBTQ community, but it just never sat right with me. I didn't like how people felt so justified in hating someone off of knowing one data point about a human being. It was just ridiculous. So that led me from my late teens into my early 20s, and it was at that time in my life that I found the atheist community on YouTube. Now, there's a lot of misconceptions around what it means to actually be an atheist, and it is not a proclamation that there is no God. Well, for most atheists, it's just that I have a lack of belief in God, and I know for anyone like just dipping their toe into this subject, those things can sound almost exactly the same, but they are very different. There is a distinction. One is making a claim, one is making an assertion that this thing does not exist, which would require evidence, and the other is saying, based on what other people have said to convince me that this thing exists, I am not convinced. So that doesn't mean that my mind couldn't be changed or anything like that, but a in front of a word just means like not or non or lacking, and theist means, religion or believing in a god or multiple gods. So an atheist is simply someone who is unconvinced, someone who doesn't believe. And when I found the atheist community on YouTube, it was very, very intriguing. I really loved how there was so much emphasis on logic and analysis, and only believing things that are justified, because it is better to believe a thing that is true than to believe a thing that is false, especially if those false beliefs that you're holding can contribute to harm of others. So I made that transition and I started calling myself an atheist, and for a long time I was very aggressive and dismissive of any sort of religious belief, because I was just like, if you're a theist, you're irrational. I was not a super pleasant person at that point in my life with regard to religion. But then, moving on, I gave birth to my daughter, and I can already feel the eye rolls of probably a lot of atheists watching this video. But I know that it's fair. I don't know how common it is, but I know I've heard other new moms who were atheist or agnostic give birth to their children and feel like it was a very spiritually awakening experience, and just completely changed their outlook on life. And I am one of those women. I gave birth to my daughter, and I looked at her, and something in me just felt like making a human being is much more than a simply physical, chemical, genetic process. To create new consciousness just carries more weight than that. We cannot quantify consciousness. We cannot state its origins. It's the spark of life, and that understanding sort of reawoke in me when I had my daughter. And from there, all I can really say is spirit started speaking to me on everything from the food I would choose to what route I would drive home from work. And I know how that sounds, but the reason that I felt like it was spirit, or still feel like it was spirit, is because let's say I wanted to eat some Subway. I'd get up from my desk, I'd walk to the Subway by my office, and then maybe 10 or 15 blocks, I would just get this strong knowing that you shouldn't eat Subway today, you shouldn't eat Subway today. And it was almost like an audible voice telling me do not go into this establishment, don't get food from here today. And so I would, just kind of, okay, I would kind of brush it off as oh, I have a weird feeling about this restaurant today. And I'd choose somewhere else to eat, and then maybe a couple days later, I'd find out that exact location that I was about to go in and get some food from, got shut down by the health department. I remember one time I was driving home, and I got this strong knowing that I should not go the way that I normally would go home after work. And I almost ignored it. I remember I was about to turn I was about to make a right turn, and I just remember like my hand started shaking, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go straight. I'm gonna go the long way around. And later I found out that there was a really horrible car accident that happened right at the time I was about to turn onto that street, and someone died, and the road was backed up for like 2 hours. And had I just gone my normal route and not listened to that very insistent voice that I couldn't identify at the time telling me like, do not go this way, go that way. You know, for all I know, I could have been in that accident, or maybe it just would have taken me, you know, a couple hours longer to get where I needed to go, and then that may have been a domino that created something else negative. All I can really say is that Spirit started speaking to me loud enough that I couldn't ignore it, and when I started following those intuitive hits, evidence followed very shortly thereafter, even though I know for all of my logically minded left-brained folks, that's anecdotal evidence and it's not quantifiable, and you can't. I get all that. I get it. Okay, thanks so much. I get it. I'm just not there anymore. So Spirit got to the point that I couldn't ignore it anymore, and I got very goal-oriented and started reading a lot of material about personal development, and there was so much crossover. Well, I shouldn't say crossover, like a lot of overlap, I guess, where authors would talk about meditation and visualization, and, you know, regardless what you believe, you need to have a sense of being connected to something greater. And I can say at that point in my life, there was definitely like a struggle between the part of me that super identified with being an atheist and the part of me that was really open and receptive to getting these messages from like spirit guides, higher realms, higher self, intuition, however you want to word it. There was really an internal struggle, but I feel like achievement in the material world is a very left brain thing, and the fact that so many standout leaders were espousing the benefits of having a spiritual component to your goal setting, it really stood out to me. So I read You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero, and she really made it clear, if you want to be an achiever, you need to meditate. And I had never done so before. So I took her advice, and the very first time I meditated, I felt connected to source. I felt a distinctly feminine presence, but it really felt like there was this, I don't want to call it an entity, but we'll use that word. It really felt like there was this entity that it is not separated from anything, that in the subatomic web of energy that is reality, that essential nature is what that entity was that I connected to. So it's kind of like saying it's everything and nothing, which I know doesn't make sense, but if you meditate and you're spiritual, you probably get what I'm saying. And I just felt this overpowering sense of unconditional love. I got the sense that this source energy that I was connecting to through meditation just does not have the same judgment that we do. And that, like, if you are a part of reality, it loves you. Like, it loves these cards, and it loves me, and it loves, like, this pen. Like, it just sounds really woo-woo. But that was a profound, very life-changing experience, and because of that, meditation became a staple in my routine. And I continued consuming, you know, goal-oriented types of books and things like that, you know, books on achievement and personal development. And I read E Squared by Pam Grout, which really appealed to my left brain and atheist mind, because the subtitle was 9 Energy Experiments. Oh, and I'm going to butcher the last half of it, but it was something like 9 energy experiments to prove source is listening to you, or to prove you can manifest anything. I don't remember, but if you look up E Squared by Pam Grout, it'll come up. And I liked the idea that it was structured as an experiment, as a series of experiments that you could look at the results objectively and say, you know, either what I expected to happen did or did not, and make up your mind from there. And on the, I'm not going to go like too deep into it because I talked a little bit about it on a panel discussion on race and tarot, hosted by the YouTube channel Spread This Witches, which is really nice. But essentially, on the third experiment, I had to ask Source for a gift and be as specific as I possibly could without naming a thing. And I had to give Source a time limit on when it was going to deliver this gift. And I remember at that point, I was trying to make Source fail. I was trying to get super specific with something that wouldn't be possible to give. And suffice it to say, I got introduced to the oracle, the system, the lovely gift that is tarot. And that was 3 years ago, and I have read tarot cards ever since, and my mind and my spirit and my life is in a completely different place than it was before I decided to really embrace the fact that it is okay to have spiritual beliefs, and that it is okay to understand that something you believe may not be quantifiable or rationally justified, but with regard to connection to unseen things and larger forces than what we can measure and detect in our human form, it's okay if it's not logical or quantifiable. I just feel like so long as the beliefs you hold are uplifting and in keeping with secular humanistic moral code, meaning that every human has inherent worth and is deserving of respect and autonomy, then I think it's fine. And like I said, I've had just such profound experiences. I've really only scratched the surface in this video, but that has kind of brought me to where I am now. So moving forward on this platform, I'm going to be doing weekly collective tarot guidance readings. I'll be doing tarot pick-a-cards, and I'll be doing videos on general spiritual principles and knowledge that I gain. I'll share it with you as I get it. And personal development. I'm also studying NLP, or neuro-linguistic programming, and that has been super profound for how I relate to my own thoughts and my own mind, and how that then creates my reality. It's been really cool. And so because I am in such a different place, and I feel like the experiences that I've had and the knowledge that I've gained can be of service to others, I am bringing it to this platform. So I hope that is, I hope that it maybe answered some questions. Please do not turn the comments below this video into a proselytizing arena. I did not go into my history of my spiritual development for anybody to preach their dogma at me or anyone else in the comments. That's not what this is for. This is just to give context for the content that is to come. So if you have questions or anything like that, feel free to leave them in the comments, or you can go to my website, which at the time of this recording is writingwithtarot.com. I have a comment box on my home page at the very bottom. You can scroll there and contact me that way. But yeah, let's just keep the conversation respectful. I am totally open to answering questions, but I do not want anyone to get disrespectful, condescending, or to start preaching at anybody. Let's just keep this an area for dialogue. Okay? So thank you so much for listening. I cannot wait to see you in my next video, and have a great week.